When I first arrived in Telefolmin, I went to the Assistant District Commissioner's office to present myself, and he'd been notified by mail beforehand. And so I went in, and he had one question for me when I walked in the door, and he said, "Are you a communist?" And I said, "No." He said, "Well, okay. Go over and talk to Greg Smith." That was the assistant patrol officer there. "Go and talk to Greg Smith. He'll show you around, and you can stay with him until you get something sorted out." So he had a house with a couple of bedrooms and let me use the bedroom. And the following day, Greg Smith took me out and he said, "Look, we'll go and talk to some people and see if we can find somebody that would be interested in working with you." And we walked along the road. It was actually a gravel path going away from the runway and headed down towards where the villages were. And we came to a group of men who were working on the road with shovels and picks and so on. And he introduced me in Tok-Pisin, and I could say a couple of things to them in Tok-Pisin as well. And that all seemed to work out fine. And he then turned to them. He said, "Well, this fellow here is Dan. And what he's going to do is he's going to come and listen to all of your stories. Then he's going to tell them to us." And I was thinking, that's not quite how I wanted to put it, especially since I'd already been told that most of the stories were secret. So the response I got is something that actually is one could patent. It's what I call the telephone stare. So the response was, "That's all." So we walked away, and I told him, "Well, maybe I'll try to figure out something else, but I do have to find a place to stay because I can't stay with him stay forever." And the assistant district commissioner says, "Look, you're going to have to find your own stuff because we can't keep you here." So that was fine. I didn't want to live on the government station. And I fell back on some advice that Ken Burridge had given me when I talked to him about his own field work. And he said, "Whenever you don't know how to do something, just rely on the local folks. They'll figure it out." And so I walked down, I took a slightly different road and walked down towards some other villages south of the government station, out towards where the headwaters of the Sepik are, actually. And I saw a couple of villages, and I looked, and all I could see were a couple of dogs walking around, and that was it. The houses were boarded up. There was nobody there. And same was true for the other village and a third one down the road. And there were a couple of old people around, but they didn't speak any Tok-Pisin, so that didn't work. And I said, "Okay, well, clearly I've missed them." So I went out earlier the next day. And as I was headed down, I saw all kinds of people fanning out across the landscape with bows and arrows and axes and bush knives and net bags. They were going to go to work in their gardens, but their gardens weren't near the village. They were all off in the bush someplace. So they're all headed to the bush. So the villages were pretty much abandoned during the day. And I was trying to figure out how to do that, how to sort that out. And what I finally decided to do was to just sit down at a point equidistant between two villages along that track and just wait there until somebody passed by. And in the afternoon, people started coming back from their gardens, and the kids were kind of laughing and pointing and giggling and all that kind of stuff. The adults, eyes straight ahead, they didn't turn, they didn't look at me, nothing, they didn't say anything at all. They just went right on past. And that didn't seem very successful. And finally, a fellow who was very well dressed, had sunglasses and a white shirt and shorts, came over and said to me in English, "Are you lost?" And I said, no, I'm here. I'm an anthropologist, and I just wanted to learn about, people's customs and what lives are like here and stuff. But to do that, I have to be able to stay in a village someplace. I was hoping I could do that. And he says, okay, wait here, I'll be right back. And it turns out his name was Yamis. He was a pastor for the Baptist mission. And he came back with his two elder brothers. And one of them was a fellow named Wasani, who it turns out was the member of the Legislative Assembly for Telefolmin. So he was a parliamentarian, government guy. And the other was their elder brother, a guy named Dagasim, who just seemed to be an ordinary villager. And Wasani was here, and he was saying, okay, look, I think I've got a place we can figure out for you. That'll be fine. Dagasim here can look after you. He's worked with Europeans a lot. He's a good guy. He understands you folks and stuff, and he's very reliable. He's a hard worker. You'll be okay with him. Just one thing before I go. I understand about your work. I've heard about this kind of stuff before. Just one thing before I go. I'm going to get things sorted out, get your gear down to the village. But the first thing you have to know is that there are two kinds of talk. And there's public talk, and then there's hidden talk. And the public talk, people will tell you anything you want to know. That's fine, but you cannot have anything to do with secret talk. That's off limits. You can't do that. Okay. Say, okay. So Yamis and Wesson walked off. And as they walked off, Dagasim said to me, you see that cliff in the mountains over there? That's where Afek came from. She came from Oksapmin. She walked over the mountains. She came down here and she walked around, came over that hill there. You see the bare spot of the hill, and walked down, and she built Telefolmin. Okay, so that was fine. But felt to me like that was probably secret talk. I'm not sure he was supposed to be telling me that and that kind of thing. And as I later found out, yes, he wasn't supposed to be telling me that. That wasn't the normal way that things are supposed to go. But that's okay. What I start off with is I wanted to look at disputing, and the first thing they wanted to do was to teach me that secrets are off limits, and then they started telling me secrets, say, but you can't talk about them, right? Which turns out to be their practice as well. Well, when we got down to the village with my gear, Wasani gave me a wonderful welcoming speech. He called people out, and they were all in the village, standing in the plaza or on the verandas. And he started off in English and then switched over to talk Pisin. He said, "This is really something. You're making history here." That's the phrase he used. You're making history here. We've never had a white man living in our village before. This has never happened. This just doesn't happen. In fact, we don't even have Telefolmin from other villages living here. It's very unusual. That doesn't happen very often at all. Normally people, they've got their village, you just stay in the village and that's it. But we're really happy to have you here, and you're very welcome. We'll get you sorted out. You'll be able to live here just fine. Even in the old days, we just didn't. Oh, wait a second. There was one guy. There was a guy from Missimin, that village over there. He was good friends with one of my uncles. And he moved in here. He wanted to move in here because he had so many good friends here. And that was fine. Everything worked out fine. They gave him garden land, and helped him with his gardens and all that kind of stuff. Everything was great. But, he started doing something with women. And so we had to chase him. And we chased him down into the Sepik. You can see where the gorge is down there. We had to chase him down into the Sepik, cross up over the other side, cross up over that ridge over there, and over to the other side into Nonkaman Valley. 2 days later, we ended up chasing up the other side of the mountains there, and we finally caught up with him at Yangdabom and had to kill him. But we're really happy you're moving in here. So there, the ground rules were being set, okay? Secrets, you don't go blabbing secrets. You don't mess with women. You don't do that. That's how these things are going to work. I didn't particularly feel inclined to infringe on those rules, so that was okay with me. And he gave me a room in his house to live in while we got things organized. Um, we did get things sorted out eventually. One of the things I also learned from Ken Burridge is if you want to know about material culture, one of the things you have to do is get involved with it. And it turns out there was an empty spot a blank spot in the village circle where a house could fit. And I said, okay, here's a house. I want to hire some people here, build a house here. And I helped work building the house too. So I learned how to tie rattan and you know what goes where and all of those kinds of things. What are these pieces called? What are those pieces called? What kind of tree is this? All that kind of stuff. It was wonderful work actually. I learned a great deal, especially about different kinds of wood and things like that. And I got to meet all the guys who were working on the house. So it was a way of introducing myself to the folks in the village. And that was just fine. And it was also a kind of classic participant observation. This is what you're supposed to do as an anthropologist. You know, you take part in the life in order to learn about it. That was pretty good too. I learned that there are limitations to that. And one of the limitations I found out was when Yemis, the guy who had met me along the road in the first place, was having a garden cleared. He was having it cleared because as a pastor for the mission, he couldn't travel all over the bush. So he had to stretch a bush fairly close to the village. And he got a work party together from folks in his village to clear some forest there and to build fences and start planting a taro garden. And I was there and I had my notebook and my cameras and I was taking pictures and this, that, and the other thing. But it was kind of boring because everybody's working hard. And here I am just sort of, you know, bugging people or trying to talk to them or sitting down. And I finally said, look, you know, let me help here. And one of the things I reckoned I could do is I knew how to split fence rails. I learned that when I was young from my father. So let me just help out with the fence rails here. They say, yeah, okay, fine. Somebody lent me an axe and had there was a log down there and then a piece of wood, and I started splitting it. And I was being very careful because I didn't want to do any missteps there. So I realized as I got to the bottom, the risk was chopping through the wood and having an accident. So of course I took the axe and I carefully laid it aside on that log. And I took the two pieces of wood like this to pry them apart and split them. And it worked just fine, except it was green wood and it was very springy. And one of those pieces struck the axe handle. The axe flew up in the air, twirled around like this, and landed on my ankle, slashed my ankle. And I was bleeding all over the garden like a stuck pig. I was getting dizzy. I was sort of going in and out of consciousness on the ground. The women are all gathering around. They're singing and crying and there are tears down their face. And it turned out later there were mourning songs. Oh, you're going to die. You're dying. Oh, no, you're dying. And one of my elderly next door neighbors had some leaves together and some vines. He started binding up my wound and going and whispering words into it. I said, what are you saying? He said, shut up. They built a stretcher for me. They made a stretcher in about 4 minutes, tied me to the stretcher, carried me up over the hills, carried me up the road into the mission hospital, where they took me to the doctor to have a look. He stitched up my ankle, gave me some disinfectant and stuff like that. He says, actually, your ankle looks like it's going to heal up fine. Whatever that guy did, it's helping, and that kind of thing. And I, with a stick, limped back to the village, got back there, thanked the old fellow, Welagin, who's my next door neighbor, for helping me with my ankle. And then Darasim saw me. He said, so are you going to be all right? I said, yeah. He said, fine. He said, don't you ever do that again. We told you already, we're making a garden. We didn't need your help, right? Listen, use your ears. When we say no, you don't do it, okay? You're a big head. Don't try to ignore what people tell you. You do what you're told, and if you don't, everything's off, okay? You're not to touch an axe again as long as you're here. If you want firewood cut, you can have an axe, you just can't use it. If you want firewood cut, ask a kid to chop some firewood for you. Ask an old lady to chop some firewood for you. Ask anybody to chop some firewood for you. You're not going to do it. It's off limits. So that was a pretty good lesson. Do as you're told, right? Follow the rules. And there are limits then to participant observation, and that's clearly one of them. The ground rules. Dagasim is the guy who insisted on telling me a secret as his brother was walking away. It turns out it was kind of an open secret that I was hearing secrets. And so I would always have a fire going in my house in the evenings or the afternoons when the village was empty. People would come inside. People, meaning men, initiated men, would come inside and they'd start telling me about the journeys of the ancestors, Afek, and what she did and where she came from, what was up and what happened. And of course, they would say, okay, this thing is wengamem. Wengamem means this is secret talk. This is sacred talk. You can't talk to anybody else about it. So, well, can I write it down? They say, yeah, it's okay. Well, can I tell anybody? Can I tell people in Canada about it? He says, no, that's okay. You just can't do it here. Just can't do it here. That's the expression. Keep it quiet. So I did. And Dagasim had a particular routine that was good for sharing secrets with me or for telling me things. It turns out he knew a lot. And the way he would do it is he would wait until everybody was asleep in the village, and he'd come out in the middle of the night and come over to my house. And the way he would do that is the men in Telefolmin hunt marsupials in the forest, and they're nocturnal, so they do their hunting at night. And they're used to people going out with a bow and arrows at night to go hunting and stuff like that. So I'd hear a scratch on my door, and Dagasim would come in, and the floorboards would creak a little bit, and then we'd whisper while I was writing things down by kerosene lamp and stuff. And this was going on one night, and all of a sudden, I jumped out of my skin because I heard this sound from the roof. And it turns out what it was is there was an owl sitting on my ridgepole on my roof. And that spooked me. But what scared me even more was Dagasim said, hey, it's all right, don't worry, I'm coming. Just hang on, I'll be right along. I said, what are you talking about? He says, oh, I told my wife and kids that I was going to go out and go hunting. That's why I have the bow and arrow with me and stuff like that. And that's my grandfather. He probably overheard me because he goes into this owl, and the owl leads me through the forest to where the possums are. So he was wondering why I wasn't coming along. So now I've got to go so I can go with my grandpa and go hunt. But, I'll talk to you again tomorrow. So he wasn't kidding. And he came back with possums in the morning. So there we go. Good way to learn about things. While I was getting all these kinds of things, one of the things that I wasn't getting was what I was hoping to find there as a key strategy for my fieldwork, and that was disputes. The way I had read the literature is the way you can tell how political power gets mobilized is when somebody has a grievance or something goes wrong and somebody has a dispute with somebody else, and then you have to see how they figure it out. And that tells you how power works in the particular community. And I'd been there for something like 4 or 5 months, and I had not witnessed a single dispute. I couldn't believe it. I had women yelling at their kids and stuff like that, and sometimes spouses yelling at each other, but that was it, And finally, one day, I had it was a Sunday gathering there for meeting. I had to meet once a week, so everybody would touch base at the village to see the local government counselor. And at this meeting, this old fellow stood up and he said, so-and-so's pig broke into my garden a couple of months ago and ate a whole bunch of taro stalks there, and he still hasn't replaced them. Now it's happened again. He didn't apologize. He didn't do anything. He didn't make it good. This pig has gotten into my garden again, and I'm fed up. I want something to happen, right? It's a dispute. The guy next to me says, "Have you got any tobacco?" "Who's got tobacco? Anybody got tobacco around here? Hey, give me some tobacco. Here's some tobacco." "Okay, fine, fine." "Anybody else want some tobacco?" All of a sudden, all the men around the village are passing tobacco around to each other, rolling cigarettes, lighting up their cigarettes, saying tobacco. And then one of the other guys says, "Boy, pigs, pigs, pigs. That's all anybody can talk about anymore is pigs. Boy, I'm fed up with this pig talk. Pigs, are you kidding? You're just going to talk about pigs? Well, I've got work to do. I'm going to go off." And he picked up his axe, his net bag, his cigarette, and he went off. And so did the rest of the village. And the only two people left in the village were the guy who was complaining about his pigs and me. So that's where disputes were going, right? Telefolmin don't like to dispute. It's not what they do, right? They avoid each other. They're quiet. And sometimes they say, "Well, boy, you wait, his pig got into my garden. Wait till one of mine gets into his. He won't be able to say anything." So that basically unwound my strategy. It didn't work. It wasn't going to work. There's another problem for the strategy. The initiations are supposed to be really big. Each village had a spirit house. Some of the Christian villages didn't, but normally each village had a spirit house. And the biggest one of all was the one at the village of Telefolmin. And how was I going to see these? Well, the first time I tried to go down towards Telefolmin, there's this grove of very, very tall hoop pines behind the village. It's glorious, and you can see it from the far end of the valley. That's where the village is, because that's the sign that the village is there. And it's like a park. All kinds of animals. You can't molest or harm anything in that grove. It's sacred. And on the near side of the grove, I saw a bunch of boys, maybe 6, 7, 8 years old, and they had red paint on their faces, and a couple of men with them. And so I said to the guy, "Is that face paint? I knew the word for initiation. Did you guys have an initiation?" So much for that. I later found out, yeah, they had initiation. In the nature of things, initiations don't happen every week or even every year. You have to have a gap of some years between them to get a cohort together to put them through. It turned out that was the last initiation at Telefolmin during the 20 months that I was there. There wasn't going to be another one. So if I wanted to see initiations, I had to go where they were. And how was I going to know about that? Well, I'd had to have people tell me when an initiation was coming. I did hear about one that was about maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours walk away. And I did manage to get there, but only as it was concluding. So I saw as the boys came out of the house, and they were quite happy to, I'll give you some photographs at some point about this too. They were quite happy to tell me about how their net bags were constructed and their decorations and things like that, but nothing about what went on inside the house. No, that didn't work. So one of the strategies that I was hoping to hit upon was to go to some place further afield where initiations were going to be held. And as luck would have it, I had an unexpected gift on the part of a colleague named David Heinemann, who is an Australian anthropologist, or an anthropologist from Australian University, working among Wapkaiman people at Bultem village across the main mountain range from where I was. He was studying ecological anthropology. He wanted to learn about all the ecological niches. So he, with a bunch of guys, had walked over. It's a 3-day walk from his place, showed up in mine. We had a great time talking anthropology with each other. And he said, "Well, I've got to go now. I've got to head back." And I went to Doug Seam and said, "Doug Seam, can we go for a walk?" He said, "Yeah, sure. Okay." So we joined them and we walked 3 days over the mountain range down to Emeritus village among Fieldwork people, where another anthropologist who was a student of Roy Wagner's named Barbara Jones was doing her research. And we had corresponded by mail. It took several weeks from one letter to go and another one to come. But there, David Heinemann and Doug Seam and I and Hyman's friends, we walked into the village. And we had a little bit of luck. The little bit of luck we had is we arrived just after an initiation, but the guys were all wearing their initiation regalia, and Barbara would talk to us about it and stuff like that. And that was it. And then there was another nice thing, which is Dagasim was happy to come, partly because that was an old trade route. And when he walked into the village and somebody recognized him, this old guy came out of his house, put his arms around him. It was his father's trading partner. So he had a great time. He had all kinds of tobacco and shells laid on him and stuff like that. For him, it was a successful trip to, all the way. Barbara Jones, David Heineman, and our entourage walked back to Bultem village. And just the first stopping off point before I turned north to head back over the mountains to Telefolmin was at a place where there was a new airstrip called Tabubil. And Tabubil was the airstrip that was to be the headquarters of mining exploration for the Oktedi copper mine. It at the time had a few dozen houses and it was a dirt airstrip. Not much was going on. It turned out later on it was actually quite important. Saying farewell to Barbara Jones and to David, Dagasim and I walked over the mountains again, had a great time. He taught me all kinds of things, including how to get birds to come to you by whistling. And he actually did. He says, see that bird over there? You know what that is? No, I can't see any bird. He'd whistle and it came. He said, that's the bird. And then we walked home. So that was great. I learned. I had lots of exercise. And I got to meet some colleagues and that kind of thing. I learned a little bit about the other kinds of stuff, but I still hadn't seen an initiation, and I haven't seen one. Okay, what I saw at that when the boys emerged from the house was the closest I got. So the only alternative I had was to listen to stories and to have people tell me about things and about their experiences.